Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. I am Billy Embody. Thanks for joining us on this Monday. Wanted to get a pod out to you guys earlier this morning, but just kind of scheduling in my life kind of delayed that until your drive home. If you're listening to this, maybe you just are picking up the kids from school. So hopefully we can do these live Monday editions of the pod more often and hope everybody enjoys them. But we're going to talk about SMU basketball a lot on this podcast. We're going to talk about SMU football as well, kind of some final thoughts and maybe things that slipped through the cracks on the post-game show with Jonathan McGill and Dean Rawlski, as well as some recruiting takeaways and some general week 6 thoughts around college football. We'll do this kind of as a scatter shoot on Mondays moving forward. So excited about that. And we do all that and more on this edition of the On the Pony Express podcast presented by Northwest Insurance Agency, which starts right now.
When you clock in every day, there's always that chance that something can happen. You don't know when, where, or how, but accidents are inevitable. As a business owner, you don't want to be left holding the bag whether something happens to an employee or customer. General liability insurance covers everything from a slip or fall all the way down to a paper cut. At Northwest Insurance Agency, we will get you any necessary coverage that pertains to your field. So get covered under the sombrero by calling 855-88-75656 or visit us at nwagencies.com.
This is the On the Pony Express podcast, part of the On3 network. Check out all the SMU coverage you need at ontheponyexpress.com. Now, here's your host, Billy Embody.
1, 2, 3, let we go.
That is right. Happy Monday, everybody. Hope you guys are enjoying it and having as big of a Monday as you can, like Andy Enfield and his staff. We'll get to the first commitment on the class of 2026 for Enfield and the Mustangs in just a second. But of course, want to remind you guys about our friends at Northwest Insurance Agency. Mark Villasana, a proud SMU alum and owner of Northwest Insurance Agency, can help you navigate the world of insurance. Give him a call, 214-352-5656, or email him, info@nwagencies.com. Monday came and it kind of caught me by surprise around lunchtime when Cameron Lomax, point guard out of the DFW area, announced his commitment to SMU fresh off an official visit to see Andy Enfield and his staff, somebody who has been around this program a lot over the last year or so, and kicks off this class of 2026 for SMU basketball. With Lomax on board, now SMU has this point guard kind of the future in a sense with Lomax in the boat. He was on the sideline pregame before SMU took on Syracuse this weekend and was there with family and friends and things like that, and getting some time around the staff. And actually right place, right time for me. Now I'm at the point where I'm on the field pregame. I wait until the game gets underway to hit the press box because we get some video content, of course, around the pregame atmosphere and just seeing all the recruits on the sidelines for SMU. And I actually watched it go down. Assistant coach Jay Morris was right there and kind of gave the handoff to Cameron and his family. And that's when he kind of whispered a little something to Andy Enfield. And I was kind of watching out of the corner of my eye. And sure enough, that was him announcing his commitment to Andy Enfield, him telling him. So right place, right time for me, as I was able to see that one go down, and just kind of said to Cam, I said, hey, we'll catch up in just a little bit as we get through this official visit and he gets moving forward with announcing his decision. I'd kind of overheard it was going to happen during this week. He wanted to get it out of the way, of course, did it on Monday. So looking forward to covering him. He's out of Heritage High School up in the Frisco area, originally from McKinney. He was somebody that SMU really got their eyes on in a big way at Peach Jam, where he was one of the more dominant players in attendance there in the Augusta, South Carolina area. It's just on the other side of Augusta, Georgia. Yes, you're not thinking that there's another spot there that's so far away, but Lomax went off. I mean, averaged a ton of points up at Peach Jam, had a 30-point outburst in that big showcase event that is always kind of at the end of the live eval period. And he had a huge day in front of Andy Enfield as he's kind of risen up some of the recruiting rankings. He had a 30-point game, like I mentioned, for against Team CP3. Yes, Chris Paul in 17 games with Drive Nation, which if those of you who keep track on the basketball recruiting side of things, Drive Nation is where Jermaine O'Neal Jr. and Jaden Toombs from last class play their high school basketball for Jermaine O'Neal Sr. Lomax averaged 14.3 points, 2.8 rebounds, 2.8 assists, and 1.7 steals per game in 17 games on the Nike circuit. Here's where it gets good. He blew up this summer in a sense with that showing at Peach Jam and his overall play. Here was his run of official visits. Xavier, Houston, Oklahoma State, then SMU, was set to visit LSU, Arizona State, and Oklahoma. Good group there for SMU. And here's the thing, and I think this is important as we go forward with recruiting. SMU has a need for a point guard in the next recruiting cycle, in a sense. You need somebody to come in and fill the shoes of Boopy Miller after he leaves following this season. So with that, Andy Enfield and staff probably going to go after a transfer or hang around on maybe some of these high-profile five-star type of point guards, trying to see if they can get one late in the recruiting cycle. But right now, you have a local kid in Cam Lomax who's been around. I kind of joked with Cam. I said, we were doing this a year ago on the field before an SMU football game when Ryan Hampton visited. Cam Lomax was on that same visit. And now with Cam Lomax committed, you have somebody who really looks like kind of that perfect developmental point guard, a high upside type of player based on his play this summer and on the circuit. This is a big deal for SMU to get him. Just talking with sources over the course of the summer and kind of following and tracking recruiting a little bit, there was that sense that, okay, SMU was kind of hanging around with some big five-star type of players, but there really wasn't much thought that they would end up getting one. And so now they end up getting Cam Lomax on board in this class, and he gives SMU somebody that they can develop. The next piece, let's say after the season, would be finding that point guard that can make an immediate impact, kind of that stopgap between Boopy Miller and Cam Lomax. So a really nice local kid to pick up for SMU. Great offer list, great visit list, all the things you want. I would imagine Rivals gives him another look as well. And so his ranking there wouldn't necessarily be final, but a top 150 overall prospect, top 25 point guard, top 10 prospect in Texas. That's good news for SMU basketball. Speaking of good news, I do want to remind you guys, of course, about our friends at Status Jet real quick. Good news is you could still get flights to Clemson, Wake Forest, and Boston, as well as Cal. You can do all of that with our friends at Status Jet. So reach out to David Henry and his team today. I just hooked up somebody with him this morning, and you'll get a discount on a round-trip flight with our friends at Status Jet when you mention us at On the Pony Express. So reach out to them today. They'll help you plan the trip of a lifetime. As we turn the page from recruiting on the basketball side of things, you've got to look at this SMU basketball team as a whole. And when you see the ACC tip-off this week, you're going to see, of course, Adia Barnes and the new look SMU women's basketball team kick things off as well. They did get a big commitment themselves. And I actually, good reminder here as I was kind of making that transition to highlight this one, because Saturday night, SMU women's basketball did get a 4-star point guard, Shania James, committed, top 75 overall prospect, just on the cusp of being a top 50 prospect, top 10 point guard, number 2 prospect in Illinois, had offers from a bunch of schools. I saw Houston was one, Texas A&M was another, Pitt, numerous others hosted her on visits, Penn State, Auburn, and she took an official visit back in the summer to SMU and ended up going through her visits and announcing her commitment to SMU. So shout out SMU women's basketball, also getting it done on the recruiting trail as well. ACC tip-off this week in Charlotte for all the basketball teams in the league. Of course, a league that is really starting to kind of get back on track as far as investment. Some new first-year coaches in there, including Will Wade. A lot of attention paid to NC State, but a lot of attention paid to SMU as well. Just talking to a couple people around the program, there's a really good buzz around it and what they're going to. Yeah, Xavier, hi. I'm live right now. We're good. Shout out Xavier in the chat. But this is this SMU basketball team is going to get a lot of buzz around them in the preseason. We had On3 national analyst Jamie Shaw. He's been kind of writing some of these breakdowns on rosters as as the season gets going. And he highlighted Samet Yigitolu as a sophomore who's got a chance to break out. Even was featured in the feature image of the article as well. And there's a lot of buzz around this SMU team being better than it was last year. Now, the question is the ACC all that better on paper and beyond going into this season? There's a lot of thought that all that investment from some of these key programs is certainly there. UNC is going to have quite the target on its back to take a step back up in this league. And then, of course, you have Duke, who is looking like they're going to reload, new coach of Miami, and Jai Lucas, and all sorts of change around the league. But keeping it on SMU, for those of you who are going to be able to watch on the ACC tip-off side of things, Adia Barnes has already gone through and hit the podium at the ACC tip-off event, as well as Ty Skinner and Kyla Deck as well. So you can rewatch those on ACC Network or ACC Network Extra. But on Wednesday, it's going to be SMU men's basketball that'll be out there at 9:45 a.m. Central. ACC Network will have Andy Enfield on, as well as BJ Edwards and Boopie Miller right after that at 10:30. And it's a all-day affair to have this ACC tip-off event. So make sure you watch it. Get familiar with some of these other teams. A lot of great features going on with our friends at the ACC Network. They're a blast to talk with. Looking forward to spending more time with them. Looking forward to spending more time with them as this kind of second season for all of us gets underway. I feel like we got such a good feel for how football went with that year one and what SMU went through, jumping up into the college football playoff and making the ACC championship. Now college basketball year two feel a lot more settled. I was very comfortable going into this season with football, but basketball, I'm looking forward to kind of involving more people and getting more people on the pod to talk some SMU basketball and things like that. And we're lucky to have built a good number of contacts to make that happen over the last year. But shout out Xavier, shout out Jerry in the chat, as well as Aaron Hawk talking about the basketball team. And winning neutral site games going to be very important because this SMU basketball team has a bunch of them this year, and they were able to put together a schedule with 4 straight SEC games on it. Now you're going to want some of those to be at Moody in the future, but that's also kind of the trendy thing for teams right now, is to avoid getting that extra leg up by scheduling an away game and then having it flip and have it be a home and home, and you're kind of building a schedule that will kind of maybe flip-flop a little bit as far as strength with regards to the net, as far as home and home games and which side of that you're on. So teams are playing a lot of neutral site games. But, the first SMU SEC game will be in Starkville, Mississippi on Friday after Thanksgiving. And then they go at Vanderbilt December 3rd, and then head to Arlington to play Texas A&M December 7th, and then December 13th playing down in New Orleans at the Smoothie King Center. So if SMU is going to roll into conference play with a lot of buzz around it, they're going to need to have a good showing. Butler is the only kind of name team that's going to be coming to Moody Coliseum. And next weekend, or not next weekend, but the Wake Forest weekend, they're going to have Oklahoma State in Dallas for an exhibition game. So that is public. That's on the site for SMUmustangs.com. But we are going to drop kind of as soon as I'm done with this. I plan to go another probably 20, 30 minutes or so. But we're going to have our scrimmage tidbits drop at ontheponyexpress.com. So I encourage you guys to pull up a bottle of our friends at Socorro and read the scrimmage tidbits. Lots of good stuff there, as SMU basketball spent about 40 minutes in Moody Coliseum on Saturday morning before the football game, getting some work in. And then they were able to, go enjoy the Boulevard and enjoy all of those things as, we were seeing some of them walking Cam Lomax and them around. But with Moody Coliseum, getting a chance to see that type of SMU basketball team, the early buzz out of there was really nice. That's all I'll say. Boopie Miller is somebody that is building a lot of buzz around himself, I think, going into the season. I know the end of the season with the injuries and things like that isn't what you would like, whether it be Boopie, whether it be this team, and whether you're an SMU fan, but he's back. He is looking to build off of what he did last year, which I think when he was at his best, SMU was obviously at its best. But now they're in a position where they have somebody who's returning in the system for a second straight year at the point guard position. A lot of key players back and a lot of newcomers that are really strong players for this SMU basketball team. So really looking forward to seeing what that means, being in a year two for a guy like Samet Yigitolu, being in a year two with BJ Edwards, with, the development that he saw last year. You have Jaron Pierre Jr. coming in, who was, in the regular season before any postseason games were played. He was the number one point leader in all of college basketball. This team has a lot of pieces in a good way. This isn't a team that goes into this season, I think, really trying to figure out what they can do from a rotation standpoint. A lot of that seems like it's not set because everybody obviously competes and things like that, and development happens and it's a real thing. But you'd be crazy not to think it's Boopie Miller, BJ Edwards, Jaron Pierre, Corey Washington, Samet Yigitolu, and I'm probably forgetting one, but I mean, those are your main guys right now for this SMU basketball team as they get ready for this second season under Andy Enfield. And, for this team, I mean, you've got to be, thrilled with who you were able to add into this basketball team and, the potential steps in the right direction for this program as a whole. I think they were able to do a really nice job of, finding, players that you'd want to have in this program. So, Jerry in Texarkana, where can I get some Socorro? I'm doing a look online. I will follow up with you in the comments afterwards, but right now, based on their website, Linden is the closest. So I think that might be a little bit of a ways from Texarkana. Actually, not too bad, 45 minutes. So if you really want to head down there, really appreciate you doing that and check them out. That is just on the retail side of things. When it comes to the restaurant and bars side of things, let's see. What do we got? Yes, that is definitely a long way to Greenville, Texas, to the El Phoenix out there for you. But we will keep you up to date, and we'll get Socorro on the case when it comes to getting you some in Texarkana. So appreciate you asking that. Let's wrap up with SMU basketball, and let's move forward now to there you go, Jerry, born in Linden. Make the trip home, make the homecoming, and we'll get you. They'll get you handled on the Socorro front. All right, SMU football wrapped up. Obviously, a 31-18 win over Syracuse over the weekend. A tough finish, but albeit a finish for SMU football. And I think this was a game that probably leaves a little bit of a sour taste in your mouth, just the way the team finished. But I can tell you this, guys, Miami fans, it's a different world. I get it. They're undefeated. I'm not trying to say SMU's Miami. I'm not trying to say all this, but football is a 4-quarter game. This is the world that we live in now, with focus and execution and where it can lapse and how it can lapse. Well, you can see it over the course of 4-quarter games every single week in college football. Talk about Penn State. James Franklin can't win the big one, but at least he could literally beat every single team he was favored against. Well, that changed over the weekend when they went out to UCLA and laid an egg. Shout out Jerry Neuheisel, brother of one of my fraternity brothers. And of course, I know Rick Neuheisel, who's had me on his radio show, is really, really excited for him. I saw some clips about him being pumped up about that win for Jerry. But that's the day and age of college football. And you're seeing it around a country where teams can't focus week in, week out. You get different levels of engagement from your players. You get different levels of execution from your players. Right now, Miami, I would say, is right there with Ohio State as the best teams in college football. You can make the argument either way, and I can be talked into either one. But Miami up big on the road against Florida State, a rival. You're trying to close it out, and it ends up being 28-22. I mean, that doesn't tell the story of the game. Miami was so dominant, similar to SMU. SMU, 2 penalties, 15 yards, won the turnover battle, made Ricky Collins look exactly like we said he would. Just a very average quarterback. And I know there's still issues in the secondary, and there are problems that they are going to continue to address. I will say this. The only thing Syracuse can do in the pass game was hit a seam ball. And there are some teams that are going to try to do that and try to figure that out again on SMU, but now SMU is going to have the chance to defend against that and figure out a way to fix that. That is something that SMU will have to do as they do welcome Stanford in this weekend. That being said, if SMU comes out with the type of effort that they did against Syracuse, against Stanford this weekend, they're going to be in great shape. And that's just the reality of it. And it is so much easier to play from ahead than it is to play from behind. And I love, somebody said it on the message board, the Baylor game for SMU was so interesting from the standpoint of you had this feeling that it just never felt good, right? You felt good when SMU went up 14 and it looked like they were about to really slam the door shut on the Bears and that would be enough and that would be over. But the entire game, Baylor was moving the ball. Like they were moving it. There wasn't much hope at the time. There were some fourth down stops and things like that, but there really wasn't this good feeling about the overall situation they were in. When you look at the Syracuse game for SMU, they were in a good situation pretty much the entire time. Yeah, that's the reality of it. And when you look at Stanford now, if you come out with that type of an effort and you end up winning in similar fashion, maybe this week, now that they've gotten through the hump of beating a Power 4 team this year, Rhett Lashley said it, and I tend to agree, they got over that. That's why I kind of harped on the question of, well, how much does this mean? This win mean? Not only from an emotional standpoint of getting a win that they so desperately needed after going 2-2 in non-conference play, but also just for this team to say, "Hey guys, we can come out, play really good football, execute well, don't have penalties, play turnover free until the fourth quarter, and we could be in complete control of a football game." Syracuse is a proud team that plays hard. Stanford is down on its luck for the most part. I expect a similar type of performance from SMU. You'd like it to not come with a 3-and-out and a shank punt on the opening drive, but you're able to find a way to build a huge lead and get going and get gone. And I think for me, that's what this Stanford game has to be again. 11 a.m., be ready to roll. I mean, think about Stanford. It's going to be 9 a.m. for them, kickoff time. I mean, there are no excuses for SMU in terms of trying to get in position to beat Stanford. And the only excuse is, well, college football players these days. I mean, that's it. And you look around the country, guys wake up and they don't have it like they did the week before. They don't have it when Florida State beat Alabama. They don't have it when Alabama played at Florida State where they didn't have it. And then they put it together and they beat Georgia a couple weeks ago or last week. It's 2 weeks ago, and then beat Vandy. It is so hard to have guys ready to go each and every week. And so if you can have them ready to go and you play out from ahead, it's a lot harder to obviously get beat. And I think that's where now in conference play, this is where for the third year now, we'll see how Rhett Lashley and his staff meet this test. Because this team that they have, I would say, and I think most would agree now at this point from what we've seen 5 games in, this is not as talented of a team as it was last year, especially defensively, right? Like all the defensive line talent, the Kobe Wilson, Ahmad Walker help with Alexander Kilgore, and shout out Brandon Maiazono and Zakai Barker almost had a pick on Saturday. Those guys are maybe starting to get it a little bit, but it is still you could tell there's missing a little bit of talent. You could argue the offense top to bottom is a little bit more talented. I won't disagree, but you really have a team that is built on finding a way. And last year was a little bit easier. The year before, it wasn't as easy. In the AAC, when they had a little bit more of an AAC roster, nobody was saying this is an ACC roster in the AAC. It was an AAC. Now, year 2 into the ACC, do we see a little bit more of that battle, that tough win that you got to claw and fight for each and every week? Maybe there's a blowout in there somewhere. I mean, Boston College looks brutal. Played 3 quarterbacks. I think it was 41 or 48-3 at one point. Let's see what the final. Yeah, it was 48-7. So I guess it was 48-7 at one point against Pitt. That made a change at quarterback before that game. That's ugly. I don't care. You've got to worry about whenever they go up there to Boston College and face them. your red bandana game, all of those things. But that is a football team right now that if you're looking ahead and you're trying to figure out what the blowout opportunities are, that's probably it. I mean, Stanford's there too. You're at home, but at least Stanford has kind of gotten off the mat a little bit. It's a really hard thing to do to have all of these guys ready to go. And so, SMU is going to have to do that against Stanford. They can't be caught looking ahead against Clemson. And honestly, there's nothing to look ahead with Clemson right now. There's a trip. It happens to be at a really cool place to play. But at this point, you're playing a Clemson team with 3 losses on the year, who beat a bad North Carolina team. The game's at 2:30 on ACC Network, so we'll talk about that in a second. But you don't have anything to look forward to other than the only thing that screws up that game for SMU is if they go in 1-1 in ACC play. So you got to focus on the task at hand. And that's where this team has to be at going into every single game. And whatever it takes to get 1-0 that week is what they've got to do. I asked Florida about that. That they did what they needed to do. That's a football team that has, been crushed over the first month of the season, and they beat, Arch Manning preseason #1 Texas. Now, we can have a different conversation about Texas, but the way Florida has played defensive style of football, if they've been able to avoid turnovers, might look a little different. But they go out and beat a more talented roster, in my opinion, in Texas, and they were able to beat them in the swamp. So going on the road with SMU's remaining schedule is nothing that should get you looking ahead, because there's nobody on the road ahead outside of Miami that you sit there and say, whoa, this is the really interesting one that we've got to keep an eye on. We're looking ahead. All that is next week after this Stanford game is a trip to a cool place. All due respect to Clemson, I don't mean this in a bad way, and I don't mean this for somebody to clip it and be, like I'm talking trash about Clemson. I am beyond excited to go to Clemson, South Carolina, and see that environment and see that stadium. But SMU's already been to Penn State for a whiteout. There's nothing that should really be having this team look ahead, because they really have to focus on themselves week in, week out, or else they're going to get beat. Just ask Baylor, just ask TCU how that went. Those 2 games, they're not looking ahead, but for whatever reason, they weren't able to get it done. And and Rhett Lashley admitted, they should have beaten Baylor and they could have beaten TCU, but they didn't. So how do the SMU staff get the players ready to rock each and every week in ACC play? It's being absolutely unwavering in the design of how they approach each and every game. And they've got to hammer it, that this is one game. And as long as you take care of one game, then you can get to do it all over again. And they said it a lot last year. You have to be okay with doing all of the mundane things, all of the routine things, all of the little things, all those cliches. But the things that get old and repetitive, you have to love to do those things to navigate conference play. And Rhett Lashley calls it the elimination game. You have to be okay with doing all of those things to get through the elimination unscathed and show up in Charlotte. And if this team is bought in because they saw the fruits of that labor against Syracuse, then you could see a way forward where they figure this out and they can be a team that maybe finds a way, even if they lose to Miami. That would make it a lot harder. But crazier things have happened. SMU is really good at home. They are. They should have beaten Baylor. They let that one fall through the cracks. But they are a good football team at home. They average a ton of points at home. They are very difficult to beat at home. They are hard out. Really hard out. So, yes, Jerry, if they get Akil Washington back for the Clemson game, that would be a plus. He was still in a boot on Saturday, so I don't know if that's going to happen. That guys wear boots all the time. Jordan Hudson is still wearing the brace, all of those things. But it just seems like, do you keep him, just shelved right now until you get to bring him back for another year? Maybe. I don't know. But there's also the worry that the 5-year rule, no exceptions, could go into play, and then he's done. So I'll be interested to see how they address that. We'll talk about that on Clemson week. And of course, there will be an ACC availability report Thursday evening ahead of SMU Stanford. So we'll get further clarity as far as where they're at. And of course, practice availability is Tuesday morning and Wednesday morning. We'll be out there at ontheponyexpress.com. Make sure you subscribe for just $1. And also hit up our friends at the Thomas Auto Group. I told you guys last week, had a friend, he's ready to get into a new vehicle, hooked him up with Brandon Thomas, and his entire team is going to take great care of them. They're Ford, Subaru, Volkswagen, and Mitsubishi dealerships. Mention on the Pony Express and get employee pricing on new and pre-owned vehicles with the Thomas Auto Group.
At Thomas Auto Group, the Thomas Promise includes the low price promise,
the pre-owned promise,
and the 72-hour exchange promise.
and finally, the 100% customer satisfaction promise. So shop Thomas Auto Group today, home of the Thomas Promise.
That's right. So appreciate Thomas Auto Group for supporting us, and also appreciate our friends at Mignon. Kind of taking a little break here for a second to reset, but Mignon, if you went on Sunday, you got free dessert with your meal if you mentioned on the Pony Express, and that went for brunch or dinner. Former SMU offensive lineman Nick Natur and his family have run this restaurant for years in Plano. They're open 7 days a week for dinner, and it is an unbelievable experience. So make sure you go over there, make your reservation on Open Table today. The link is in our podcast description to find their Open Table link to make your reservation today. Plan your next corporate event. They've got private dining space as well and can reserve big areas for groups. So we appreciate our friends at Mignon as well for supporting us at the On the Pony Express podcast. All right, SMU football kind of takeaways. I don't really have too much else on the football team side of things. I will say I feel like we forgot to mention Brandon Maiazono's interception. I thought that was a huge play in the game. He has been close several times this year to having interceptions. I mean, SMU probably wins the Baylor game if he comes down with a difficult grab. He had one against TCU, I think, that he almost grabbed. He finally hits pay dirt. Maybe that can help him out a little bit. But I thought the linebacker play was pretty good once they settled in. And I feel like this is a team now that, your front seven is really kind of starting to figure things out. I thought there were a couple holds that you would have probably seen called most games. But I think once, and this is just an opinion on officiating, I think officiating in college football is brutal. But you have a game that is out of hand. It's 24-3. It's 31-3. I think one of these holds, a couple people mentioned it in our live thread on the board. It was just an obvious hold. I think it was a 3rd and long. I think Ricky Collins got out and picked it up. I think it was, sometimes games run together. I think it was in the second half. So if you have that disparity on the scoreboard, maybe you see the officials kind of eat the whistle and keep this thing moving. It's kind of like hockey games. I feel like sometimes either officials just let the boys play the entire time, or you see a lopsided game. Officials aren't going to try to slow this down and keep everybody there all night and make it a show. But, when you look at SMU and this team, it feels like offensively, the big question going into the Stanford game is going to be around the run game. How do they fix that? How do they figure that out? And by fix, I mean, you were able to get TJ Harden. I felt like involved to a good degree. I think he finished 4.3 yards per carry. I could be wrong on that. I'll try to pull up the stat sheet right now. But when you look at what they did from running the football perspective, I felt like it wasn't that they weren't committed enough to the run. It just felt like it could have been there a little bit more. But SMU was able to still rush the ball a total of 28 times with Kevin Jennings involved, 16 carries to TJ Harden, 71 yards, 4.1 yards per carry. And then Jermico Green, seven carries, 24 yards, 2.3 yards per carry. Of course, that 5-yard loss on the safety was involved in that as well. So, you take away that run, and 6 carries for 29 yards wouldn't be a bad stat line for, freshman against a Syracuse defense that I feel like sold out to stop the run. I would be interested to know Rhett Lashley's take on that. It's kind of after getting to watch the film on the offensive line, which featured 3 guys playing out of position and/or guys that don't play a lot on the offensive line. So a very different offensive line unit that SMU is normally used to. But we will be kind of watching how that unit maybe maybe rebounds. And I don't mean it from the standpoint of, they were horrible or bad or what have you. But when you look at whenever you're losing, that many guys off a line of off a offensive line, like you're not going to perform to a level that you normally do. So it's not that they did anything just horribly wrong. It's just they were probably a little out of sorts with all the new faces, including a true freshman in Draymond Odoms. And they've got a lot of things to fix in that regard, and including getting guys healthy. And they were able to, sit Logan Parr and PJ Williams, and Andrew Chambly had a baby as a father now. So they were able to, guys sat out. And so maybe that helps them get a little healthier. They can get back on track. Stanford's run defense is in the top 40 nationally as far as yards allowed per game. So it's a good battle, good opportunity, good test for SMU because, Clemson is just a shade better than Stanford at stopping the run. So this will be a good challenge for SMU, the run game, to see obviously how they stay committed to it, if they stay committed to it, but also a way to maybe, just reestablish the commitment to the run, because TJ Harden, before the bye week was headed very clearly in the right direction as far as, being able to run the football and things like that. So that's the final thought on football. Finally, do think that on the recruiting side of things, this was one of the more fun weekends that SMU had. And let's break it down. 2 quarterbacks in particular that were in town. Malachi Ziegler, the 4-star quarterback who's long been, the top target for SMU football, was in town. Top 15 overall quarterback nationally. And then Kavion Bryant, the number 1 quarterback in the class of 2027. Both of these guys are 2027 guys. And quarterback recruiting just starts earlier and earlier. And SMU has gotten in on Malachi Ziegler very early on. They've had their hooks in there for a while. I think he's somebody that SMU is very much leader for. I would be surprised if they kind of fumbled this one away and you did not see him commit to SMU at some point. He has a couple of other visits he wants to take. The breakdown is at ontheponyexpress.com. Again, sign up for just $1 today. But Malachi Ziegler, he's the guy. I mean, they've invested so much time. They went and watched him play last week. They were able to, get out there to Leesville and see him lead his team to a big second half comeback to get their first win of the season. He just released his midseason tape. It's very, very good for a kid who doesn't have much help at the highest level of classification in Louisiana. And then on the flip side, Kavion Bryant, somebody that has been to SMU a couple times, but it just seems like Texas Tech's going to win out on this one. And I've said this on the board for the last few months. One, I'm pretty much on the verge of saying this. It's foolish to spend money on a high school quarterback unless you, and it's almost probably with the way roster construction is these days, it is probably a fireable offense for a GM or, offensive coordinator to say, hey, let's go spend, and I'm not saying this about Kavion, but let's go spend $2 million on a high school quarterback and let's go get our guy, and he not pan out. It's like a GM taking a quarterback with a top 10 draft pick, and he takes a quarterback and they don't end up panning out. Those are the things that you've got to walk the line with, because 80% of the last 2 NFL drafts at quarterback have been transfers. So unless you're getting Bryce Underwood, who is good and, still developing, but in that kind of archaic Michigan offense, nothing great, unless you're getting him, it's worth having the conversation that you should just go transfer only. So that being said, SMU really likes Malachi Ziegler. And that is the most important thing here. SMU with Malachi Ziegler is really a fit that I think works out for both parties in a big way. And I think SMU is truthfully higher on Malachi Ziegler. Everything I've heard from the last 6 months back that up. We've not pivoted on the board and said, oh, Kavion Bryant is the number 1 guy. This is the guy. This is it. At one point, Colton Nussmeier was in there. Right now, it doesn't seem like they're pressing as much there. They've visited him. They've watched him, in the spring and things like that. And then after that, you really didn't hear much about that. But Kavion Bryant was a guy that they've always been in on. But even you date back to last February or this February, past February, and he goes and does his thing at the Dallas Under Armour camp. And we're all standing there watching him. And you're like, wow, he's really put together his throwing at the quarterback position. That's kind of a weird thing to have to, navigate at a quarterback spot. You've got to be able to leave no doubt. And there's still some doubts out there about Kavion Bryant. I think his recruitment kind of reflects that. You don't have, for the number one quarterback in the country, you don't have Alabama, you don't have Georgia, you don't have, Texas has been in there. I don't think A&M's really been involved. That, there are other coaches that probably feel the same. So SMU is going all in on Malachi Ziegler, and they are also heavily recruiting Kavion Bryant. If Kavion Bryant called them up and said, hey, I want to do this, they would probably have a decision to make, because right now Malachi Ziegler is trending full speed ahead, it seems like, to being the guy. And if he isn't, then is SMU going to take Kavion Bryant? That's where things get interesting. But as far as investment goes, that's a different piece of the discussion. If, they get to a point where Kavion says, hey, I want in, I don't think they turn him away, because Malachi Ziegler has been to campus so many times now, you'd want him to go ahead and commit. But if you dawdle, you can't turn away your, what's the expression, birds and bushes and stones and things like that. That's where SMU would have a decision to make. I don't think they're going to have that decision to make, though. I think Malachi Ziegler is the guy. He's been their guy. And it would be surprising to me if he doesn't end up as the 2027 quarterback for SMU. So both of them were on campus this past weekend. Big time weekend for SMU. A lot of offers went out. We have them out at ontheponyexpress.com. Ton more reaction from recruits to come from this recruiting weekend as SMU took down Syracuse. And of course, that 11 a.m. kick sometimes makes it a little difficult for SMU to bring in guys. I'm sure they will have some recruits back in town. Got to see Evan Goodwin, Papunga Katoa. Got to see Braylon Edwards, who was back in on the sidelines. Ty Creathers, Zach Turner, Isaiah Young rolled in. A lot of the commits. So make sure you're keeping up with it at ontheponyexpress.com. And look, Xavier Wolf asked about the Rhett Lashley rumors. We talked about it on last week's pod. Bill Armstrong talked about it on Walking Strong. I think right now with Rhett Lashley, I don't think he's flirting. I just don't. And I told you guys when Sonny Dykes was getting courted by TCU, it was obvious. There's something going on there. He's, I don't want to say Sonny Dykes was gaslighting me about reporting that, the TCU interest was there and mutual and all these things. It was a reality. He was going. It was obvious. It should be more obvious that Rhett Lashley is going to Arkansas if he's going to go, right? That's where he went to college. That's where he played football. I don't think he's flirting. I don't think that's a thing right now. And at the same time, it's good to have your coach wanted, like Bill said last week. So it clearly did not impact SMU's ability to play this weekend. I don't think it's going to be a factor as it stands right now. You could get to the point where, let's say a month from now, somebody reports something and then there you go. You got to deal with it all over again. But look, there are coaches around the country that are going to have to deal with their names being put in the pot. I'm confident in saying that if Rhett Lashley has his name in the Arkansas pot, or if Arkansas rather has Rhett Lashley's name in their pot, like everybody is saying that they certainly do, and it's still in that pot, that I think he will handle it the right way. And then he'll make that decision whenever he has to make that decision. And if they keep coming back to him, then they will, either be told no or eventually he'll relent. But I'm very confident in the position that I'm taking on this, that he is not flirting with Arkansas. He has a lot of respect for the program. He played there. He would like to see it do well 364 days out of the year, with the one being when Arkansas ever were to play SMU. And that's the type of guy he is. He's competitive. And I don't think he's going to, have that be anything that distracts his team. And I think last week's showing against Syracuse kind of backed that up. So with that, we will wrap up this podcast. So thanks for all the questions. Thanks for the interactions, guys. We're going to try to do this on Monday. So let's close out with this. I want to remind you guys, of course, we've got one more sponsor I want to shout out. want to shout out our friends at AKM Turf and Greens, $500 off when you mention On the Pony Express. They can redo your backyard, your outdoor office area, get the turf down. It's getting nice outside. It's the perfect time to stop worrying about that dead grass that's coming in. Get the pavers out there. Get an incredible layout for your family, your friends to enjoy in the back half of this college football season. So they can help you plan all of that. They can put you in touch with all sorts of people to make sure your backyard looks the way you want it to. So $500 off when you mention On the Pony Express with our friends at AKM Turf and Greens. So we are going to start on Mondays doing kind of a scatter shoot on SMU stuff, but we also want to talk a little bit more college football with you guys and just overall do some takeaways, do some fun things. And we want your feedback. What do you guys want to see on the show if there were to be one where we kind of do, bring in national guests, bring in this, bring in that? We want to expand what we're doing for you guys. And part of that is we're very lucky to have a lot of sponsors supporting us so that we can do another show. SMU basketball season is on the way. We're going to have post-game pods just about every game. Football season is always that tough little line, but we're going to try to commit to doing a podcast every single game, whether it be 15 minutes, whether it be 30 minutes, if it's a big one. We want to do that for you guys. So please, in the comments, drop your feedback today or whenever you get around to it, or you could shoot me an email at billy.embody@on3.com. We want to hear from you, but most importantly, chime in at ontheponyexpress.com for just $1 for your first week. You can join the conversation and then lock in with us. It's going to be a blast. We're looking forward to it. So thank you guys for listening. We're out on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and I think, and Twitter, if I didn't say Twitter. So we're hitting you guys all with the live feeds, and we appreciate you guys stopping by on this live edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. Thanks for listening. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and have a great rest of your Monday, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the On the Pony Express podcast with Billy Embody. Follow us on your socials on X at SMU_on3 and on Instagram at on3SMU. And keep it locked to ontheponyexpress.com for more coverage.